Good evening, my dear brothers and sisters, in one of new our English editions of Apostles for Jesus. Today we have a special guest with us. I will leave it as a surprise for you. We have in the studio now Laith Koja, also one of the partners of Apostles for Jesus. Yes, Laith? No sound, Laith. Sound.
Sorry, you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Good evening and welcome for the new episode from Apostles for Jesus English edition. Today we have Gabriel Wilson who will be with us, and we will talk about something different, like not the way that we used to talk on the Apostle for Jesus. This is something in the arts, and of course in the arts and the church at the same time. So I hope you'll enjoy this evening episode and bear with us in a moment. And the mic with you, Carl.
Thank you, Laith. I will add Gabriel to our show now, and I will let him talk a little bit about himself. Gabriel, welcome to Apostles for Jesus this night. And as you see, the title is Investing Our Talents for the Glory of the Lord. Gabriel Wilson, who are you? You can take the mic and talk about yourself.
Here. My name is Gabriel Wilson. I am an author and illustrator of a series of books called Among the Saints. It is a graphic novel series that tells the stories of the lives of our saints, and I have published 2 books so far, and I'm nearing the cusp of publishing the 3rd one.
Yes, thank you, Gabriel. So you are like just publisher, or like you do all the art from the like drawings from the beginning
Sure.
of the story to from A to Z? Yes, tell us.
Yes, I am from A to Z. The entire process is on my shoulders. A lot of times you're going to have a whole team that will work on a project like a graphic novel, and you're going to have a writer and a few different illustrators. You'll have someone who's the pencil artist or the inker. You'll have separate color artists, even separate people who do the speech bubbles and the different types of text that you would see in comic books. I do it all I from start to finish. The only thing that I have someone else's hand in is the editing process, which I have my editor with Ancient Faith, Jane Meyer. She helps me out with the whole process, and she works with me through beginning to end just to make sure that the story is as impactful as it can be, and also make sure to fix my mistakes.
Great. I hope Jane, she is listening to us also, so she can join us through the phone. We will put the phone on the show. If she is listening, she can join us and tell us a little bit about her work also. Laith, if you have any questions for Gabe.
Yes, I just want to know, like, or the listener will know, like, how the idea start with you to take this part of your life to do it for the arts, and is this your main work? Like, is this your main job, or you have something else you're doing?
Unfortunately, it's not my main job. I really wish that it was, because I'm very passionate about it, and I'd like to give it my full focus. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to do that. I do have a full-time job in a financial firm, and I also have a very young family of 4 daughters, and I have a wife who take up the rest of my time that I'm not working. They're very, very sweet and very charitable with me as I go through the process and take a little bit of time from family time to work on the comic so that others can reap the benefits of that time taken away from them.
Okay, so tell us about the beginning. Like, how did you start? How did you discover this talent in your like what age you started drawing? What make you pay attention to the comics, to the animations, all of these things? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I started. uh, I don't know if I have a really have a start date. It's been my entire life to be drawing. I think that I probably was first motivated to draw once I saw the reaction in people's faces when I would show them my picture when I was young. I remember I would draw every single character of the Toy Story movie from Pixar. Um, and I just remember getting in a hyper focus one day, and it's still stuck in my head, this memory of me as a child drawing at my desk in my room for hours and hours and realizing, oh, the sun's going down while I'm drawing page after page of just a character. I really enjoy getting into the lives and the stories of each character. Character development is one of my passions, and so that naturally just led me to look into comics and graphic novels and how those stories are conveyed. Um, when I was in college, I majored in accounting and finance. Well, I wasn't getting good grades in that, and um, it it became a little bit too much for me on the brain side. I didn't want to get too involved in just numbers. It wasn't something that was grabbing me internally, and so I talked to my parents about, hey, maybe I can change my directions for my major in college, and that that was a moment that I had a conversation with my mom, and she said, "Well, what do you want to do?" So I want to just draw, and so I changed the direction entirely of what I was expecting to do in college into a degree of drawing, which wasn't actually, it was a degree of illustration and drawing at Heron School of Art and Design in Indianapolis, Indiana. They didn't have a fully fleshed out major at that time. So we got to just listen to a panel of students talk about their ideas and their majors. And well, there was one that was kind of pioneering this whole major of illustration and drawing. And he talked about his process, his workflow in his field. And he opened up into comics. And he even let us see an image of what he'd been working on in school, and I was just blown away that oh, that's cool. I didn't know that you could learn that in college. You could learn graphic novels and how to arrange comics and how to tell the sequential art or the sequential storytelling through art and imagery in college. I didn't know that that was an option. And so once I saw that, I looked at my friends sitting next to me while we were listening to the panel, and we were all just kind of agreeing with each other. It's like, oh, that one, that's the major I want to go to. I want to go to that direction. And so after that, we all got up and we went and talked to that person who all inspired us to change our direction of majors, and he really just seemed passionate about it, and I wanted that passion, so I went that direction a bit, and um, it seemed to quiet down for me a little bit because responsibility took charge of my life, and um, it took the forefront of my focus. So that meant I better get a job so that I can support my new family that I'm starting, um, and maybe I can do that on the side. And so it one day when I was working at my current job, I've been working there for about 8 years now, by the way. Um, Probably year one or two of me working there, I started drawing something at my desk when I was waiting for a phone call to come in. And I like the idea of drawing olden dwarves and wizards and everything. I really like the idea of the fantasy and folklore and everything. And I just kept drawing this person. And I thought, you know what? He looks kind of like a saint in all these icons that I'm seeing, but it's a different style. The way that I'm drawing him isn't really iconographic. It's got that feel of iconography, but it's in my own style, and I loved seeing that. And so I thought about, okay, how can I branch out into this idea of just telling the stories of our saints? I'd love to get to know our saints. And with that, I started researching about saints. I was like, oh, their lives are so fantastic. It's really good for us to know them. It brings us closer to Christ. And I thought, what if I could use my passion to tell the story of these saints in a fun way that I would enjoy reading, and even kids in our church would enjoy reading? That would just be the coolest thing. So I kind of went with the fact that I would like to see it done, so therefore I should pursue it. Now, it took a little bit of time to get that up off the ground because I didn't know where to start. Yeah, I could just start making up comics myself, but I didn't have anyone to publish it for me. I didn't have um, a really good network to start. That caused a little bit of a fizzle too, so it just kept on the back burner. This happened to be a recurring theme. But I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she said, hey, a really cool opportunity just came up in a Facebook group. There's this group of people who are creating a newsletter for children in the Orthodox Church, and it was called New Martyr Publishing. And this newsletter was supposed to try to really capture engagement from kids in the Orthodox Church, including puzzles and illustrations, stories. And I really wanted to be a part of it, so I emailed and I said, hey, here's several pieces of my work. I'd really like to be on board with this newsletter and see where we can go with it. It was an unpaid job, naturally, because unfortunately these passion projects don't tend to have a lot of money for starting out. So in the focus of let's just get it out, I began sending them little stories and snippets and illustrations to just get my foot in the door with the newsletter. Well, after so many issues of this newsletter, I started to make a little bit of a name for myself just within our group in the newsletter, and other people started to see this newsletter and start to recognize my style. And then I noticed that I caught the eye of someone in ancient faith. And my wife was very instrumental in the process of encouraging me throughout this whole thing, but also to engage with ancient faith, because I kept talking to her about this. That was my direction that I wanted to go. I would love to be an illustrator for ancient faith publishing. And she said, well, they've got a conference for podcasters and writers with ancient faith. Why don't we go to that? And so I said, okay, that's outside of my comfort zone, because I'm a homebody. I like to stay at home and just be in my dungeon while I'm working on my art. But she encouraged me to step out, and we went to the Ancient Faith Conference in 2017, I think. And we had a good time there. We got to listen to a lot of people, but that was where I got to actually present my business card that I had freshly made to others there at the conference, to say, hey, I'm an illustrator. This is what I do. I'd love to work with you. And I ended up speaking to Jane Meyer, my editor at Ancient Faith there. She said, I've seen your work. I'd like to talk to you this week a little bit later on. So let's have a chat. Later on that week, I said, hey, I'd like to be an illustrator with you guys. What do you think? Here's some of my work. And they said, yeah, we'd love the work, but we don't have necessarily like an illustrator on retainer or anything. What are you thinking? Like, do you have any ideas of what you'd like to work on? And I said, well, actually, now that you say it, I brought that idea back to the surface of I'd like to tell the stories of the lives of our saints through graphic novel format. And they said, that is a fantastic idea. We've been looking for someone with your caliber to start up something like graphic novels within the ancient faith publishing world. And that was all that I needed to open up the door. And we had a good chat about what we'd like to do. I already had a good story of what I wanted to start with, the first saint that I wanted to start with. And that opened up the door to a contract and to get started with this whole project.
Great, great.
Beautiful.
So I will add Dr. Adnan to the show now. Welcome, Dr. Adnan Tarabulsi. The mic is for you.
Good evening, Gabriel. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you? Good to speak to you again.
Good, good. Thank you. I just, sorry, I was late. I came from the hospital. I just heard the last few minutes. You know, it's very interesting that what you were talking about. Of course, as you know, the Orthodox Church, since the beginning, always in the worship, she stresses to use the five senses of the human being, because the body also shares with worshiping God with the soul. That's why we use icons, that's why we use incense, that's why we use chanting. So, and illustration and pictures and drawings, you know, would be a very important part of the church message to the world. It could be very useful. Now, I heard you talking about, you know, some project or some proposal, you know, what would you like to do? I just have one question for you about your talent, actually. What would be the best way to use your talent in writing and drawing some pictures? Would we like be an illustrator for some Orthodox online programs, or some church magazines like the Word magazine? Or would that be also, would we be reaching the Orthodox seminary to, you know, to offer something for them as an audio or visual, combined with audio or without audio, to their students, or, you know, or people? And also, what about using your talents illustration online, like Facebook, especially to reach like families, Orthodox families and their children? Because there are many avenues feasible to reach the Orthodox families, like you know, online projects like church magazine, like Orthodox seminary, like, or, you know, or Orthodox websites, Facebook. What would you think?
Sure. Well, first of all, I like the way that you started your question, which was to talk about the fact that we worship in all of our senses. And with this whole process of anyone who is an artist, who is an iconographer, hymnographer, anyone who's creating this sense of art is creating beauty within the church. My wife likes to talk about how in Orthodoxy, it's really important to have this beauty first mentality. And when we're doing our best to give these gifts of beauty with the talents that God's given us, it's a blessing in itself, and that speaks of the worth behind it rather than just money. And it's difficult to say that because we live in a society that is very bound in money and what kind of value we can bring when it comes to the dollar signs. That leads me into answering the second part of your question, which is what can we do beyond books, because that's not necessarily lucrative. Um, what can we do with our talents to make sure that we're investing our time and our money into something that's worthwhile? I'd say it's important to change our view about that, or at least be aware of the spiritual portion of that question. So we should see the value spiritually in what our talents do for others that may not be like a dollar sign that of value that we can get. So in a sense, I'm just trying to explain there's value spiritually in what we do as artists, as hymnographers, in beautifying the church. It may not always see dollar signs, but there's a spiritual value there. Now, to answer the other side of that, in the society in which we live, we are unfortunately bound to need support in that realm of financial support. I don't pretend to be an expert in this by any means. Otherwise, I'm sure I would be a full-time artist and I would have figured it out by now. But I've led my life and my passions toward the feeling of spiritual value versus the real world, or the temporal value. In my best efforts to answer that part of your question, Doctor, I'd say that if you feel that there's a trend of boosting the engagement of our youth in the Orthodox Church by creating graphics for them in schools and online schools, obviously past the pandemic, we have started to have most of our classes online if they're not in a private school. And so I'm sure there is value in that, in creating these graphics, maybe stories. That might be something that I'm a little bit more interested in when it comes to presenting that to like a school or a church or a Sunday school as the process of storytelling. But if you have a passion to use your artistic ability for the church, for Christ, to bring others closer to Christ, that is going to be a conversation that you'll really have to have with yourself and have with your family.
Yes. I know it's hard, Gabe, and I feel bad for many artists in this world who want to give their talents to the glory of the Lord. I know the life is very hard. I wish like everyone who are listening to our show today, if they can do any support for like this type of arts, instead of like spending money here and there, we need to invest in our kids and ourselves. Like till now, I like to open these comic books and start looking at them. I have I think the Bible, which has like images. I don't know what they call it. It makes a difference. It makes a big difference. So I can feel your passion about that, because I know many artists, people nowadays, they want just to do what they like, and the life is taking them away from what they like. Now, let's go back a little bit for the technology and talk about, I will show you one picture and tell me, is this what you start with before? Or you have a different...
Actually, yeah, that was the first thing that I started with was something called a Wacom bamboo tablet,
Yes.
which kind of looks like that tablet, but it has no screen. It's a flat thing that looks like a mouse pad that you plug into your
Yes.
computer, and you use a stylus like this, and you just draw on the pad, very small pad that's plugged into a computer so that you can see it on the monitor. So you're drawing down here, but the image is coming up here. And so that in itself was its own challenge. That image that you showed earlier, that was quite the upgrade. Maybe yeah, that one is a Surface Pro 3, I think. Um, but it allows artists to actually draw directly on screen, and that was very exciting for someone like me, that it was finally attainable, that I could draw directly on screen. Um, that's that's another older image of when I was just playing around with this new program. That one was actually a free program, very helpful. A lot of programs nowadays are a little bit more expensive, but I'd say I started off with the software of Photoshop. Um, and a lot of people don't know that you can actually draw and create art other than just photography in Photoshop. So that's where I started, was with Photoshop, and then I realized, hey, this is a little expensive when I lost my student discount for the softwares. And so I decided, hey, I'm gonna look for something else, like what's another good alternative that's pretty solid. And that led me to what I'm using today, which is Clip Studio Paint. And that is a fantastic software that a lot of comic artists use because it's optimized for comic artists and graphic novelists.
Great. So now,
Uh,
what's the latest one you are using?
The latest tablet I have is this. It's not on right now, but let me switch it on. The This is also from Wacom, a very well known
Wacom. Yeah, I know them
company that,
from a long time.
yeah.
I had it with Painter.
So
Yeah, Coral Painter. I had the
yes,
Wacom. Yeah.
Corel Painter. Uh-huh. So that is a completely standalone computer and
Mm.
tablet altogether, and it comes with this stylus that allows you to draw
Yes.
on screen. I usually will use a glove, a half glove, while I'm drawing on the screen, because I don't want my hand oils to get all over the screen and make smudges. Yeah, and it kind of looks odd, but that's what a lot of digital artists use. It's called a smudge guard. And then to make my process even faster, where you would use a mouse or perhaps a keyboard to have shortcuts to change your
Mm.
tools within the application that you're using. I use something like this. It almost looks a little bit like a game controller.
Yes.
It even has a little bit of a little trigger on the end, but essentially I have this in one hand and my stylus in the other, and I will be drawing and changing the settings in my other hand to
Mm.
make my process as fast and as efficient as possible, because that is a very, very crucial thing when working on a comic, especially by yourself. You have to be efficient and you have to be quick. Otherwise, people are going to lose interest in you. And that's sadly a problem that I'm sure that I will encounter um, before I release this next book, because it has been a while since I've released a book. 2020 is when I released The Broken Wheel, which was a story about St. Catherine of Alexandria. And it's probably going to release in 2023. But the quality of the art is quite different, and I have taken very great care and good attention to detail in this next comic, and I'm very pleased with the results. So I'd say it's worth it.
Great. Thank you, Leith.
uh, Gabriel, I have a question. Like when we go to, let's say, to library here, like to our bookstore, like Barnes and Nobles and others, what's
Sure.
the difficulty for somebody like you to reach these type of bookstores and to promote these type of comic books for kids? Because now if you go to these bookstores, you can't find like anything like about saints, comics, which is very interesting for somebody like me who has kids to buy them such a type of books better than to buy them like a fictions or whatever type of books they can read on it. Also, like there is a lot of Christian schools, a lot of Catholic schools. Now there is some Orthodox schools too. What is the difficulty to reach these schools to promote this type of books for the kids? Because this is very important and is very knowledgeable for them to learn through this type of books. It's easier to understand and it's easier to enjoy reading the book.
Sure. Yeah, that is an excellent question that I keep asking myself in my process of trying to market myself better. That is something I fail at time and time and again to market myself. I tend to get worn out with that side of the business because it does take a lot from me versus sitting in my corner and just drawing. That is something that gives me energy. Marketing myself, however, is a little bit difficult because I'm I'm not the type of person to brag on myself because I would see that as arrogance. And it's a little bit hard to get into that realm of just being flashy. I don't want to be part of the constant flow of ads that we have in our society. So that's a particularly difficult challenge. Um, Something else that's a challenge is that my audience is a very small but niche audience. Um, and that was my own fault when I first started this. But I think something like 3% of United States is Orthodox. So that's a very small amount. However, we do have a lot of Christians in the United States that would be interested in seeing this or reading these comics. And so the difficulty in branching out a little bit more is mainly personality focused. I have to be willing as an artist and as an author to call and reach out to these places like Barnes and Noble or go to a library and ask them for a particular day where I could set up a table to talk to anyone who's coming in or have an event where they can come in and I can sign books or present my books or
Exactly.
introduce who I
Yeah,
am. This is a
exactly.
very common thing for artists and I should say authors um, because they have to do a lot of this legwork to sell a book that is going to sell for probably less than $20 and they end up making close to like $1 an hour if you really were to cut it
Hmm.
down. So that's a challenge too.
Yeah. I think there should be like a marketing companies, like they take the percentage that they can promote this. I think there is a way because this is very important for the kids, like especially uh, for the families that they are Christians. They need their kids to learn about this type of subjects because it's very important for the family to raise their kids
Yeah.
with the atmosphere of the faith and everything around them. Even the story that they read, it's encourage them to go engage more on the faith. So there
Yes.
should be something. We have to think about it. We have to think in a way
Yes.
to promote these type of books. Yeah,
Right.
doctor.
It's something that I will say here quick, doctor, before you take back over.
Yes.
The the current process that I have to promote these books is usually social media. I could be better at this, definitely, but it's hard to focus time on or it's hard to establish which social media is going to get you the best results. Um, if it's worth it to pay for Google ads, or if it's worth it to pay for any kind of advertisement through Facebook or Instagram. Um, and so it gets a little bit in discouraging, I should say. And the main thing that I have going for me, I think, is within Ancient Faith. They have their own marketing side of things. So when they are releasing a book, they will make a huge blast all over their social media, and within churches. They usually contact these churches who have a bookstore, and they're given the option to buy in bulk. Unfortunately, I have been in quite a number of churches around the United States when it comes to my two books. They've been in those bookstores where these kids all over the country will have seen my work. Even if they can't find it in a Barnes and Nobles, they can find it in their church bookstore.
Mm. Yeah, doctor. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, let's finish.
No, just very fast. Like when you write story, like for one of the saints, where you get the information for this type of story, and who check it after you? Let's say who checked the information
Yeah.
to make sure that everything is written is correct.
Yes. There's a team of people within Ancient Faith. It's the board
Okay.
that is going to have to sign off on whatever I'm putting in a book. So
Okay.
they get frequent updates about what I'm putting in this book all year round. So fortunately for me, they go through the script of, like, the outline of my manuscript, and then they get to view my whole manuscript and check to see if things are inaccurate, making sure that I'm not accidentally saying anything heretical, and so forth. So the checks and balances there are there, and
Fair enough. Yeah.
it's helpful.
Fair enough. Yes, doctor.
Well, Gabriel, I have two questions, one from Mr. Afif Dimitrios and the other one from me, from myself. But before I get to that point, since I had experience and, with the publishing books, and I know that how the hardship you will have in order to promote for your talents, because the talented person cannot, of course, he is talented and he goes and follows his talents, follows his emotion, follows his feelings, follows his passion, But all this does not make bread. You have still to live. So financial issue, we cannot ignore it. We have to live. We have to make some money in order to invest our talents more and more, and in order to develop it more and improve it. So I think in your case, I don't know if you have thought about be combined or coupled, or do it in corporation of several entities, just like the Ancient Faith, as you mentioned, or also if you have found other talented people, whether in drawing, illustration, or the audio, and you can combine with them like a small group or a small company or corporation, and then present yourself to the ecclesiastical media, and to promote for the Orthodox faith. This is not the question I have, but I need just to see if it came to your mind anything for the future, any project, any plan, anything about this idea.
Sure. Well, I have a two-part question, so I'll answer this part. The idea that you brought up of collaborating with other artists who are doing something similar, or who are passionate about this, that would be such a beautiful thing to gather and inspire others who want to do this too. There's a multitude of saints stories that we could tell, and if that branched out into more people working on it, then God's will be done with that. or if we wanted to talk about a whole different set of stories, multiple things, maybe not just stories, but that's come to mind multiple times, to gather and collaborate with others to create this one entity or this company that could be that brand, or that go-to group for certain books or certain stories that need to be told, um, to glorify God and glorify the church. The second part of my answer to your question there is that we do in our society get caught up with the fact that, hey, if I have a passion, it has to be full time. And while that may be a desire for us to, specifically for me, it would be heavenly for me to be able to do this full time and to be financially supported by it. That hasn't been possible for me in the past 6 or so years that I've been working through this. And I think that it's, I've developed a piece about it. I've developed a piece that, hey, sometimes these types of things require me to uh, do this on the side, do this alongside me, doing something that feeds my family, and so that I can continue to do this job. It's not ideal, and I understand that, but I would encourage anyone who's in the same situation as me to really look at themselves and look at how they can attain that peace, even though they're not doing their passion full time.
Sure.
I hope that doesn't sound
Uh,
defeatist.
well, let me allow me to ask you a fifth Demetrius question. Actually, it's two parts. The first part, how much your family is affected by what you are doing by your talents? Your daughters, do they follow your footsteps? Do they have talents? How you encourage them? The second part, what is your advice for parents who have talented people, talented kids, but as everybody else, their kids spending much more time on Facebook, on video games, on something that does not help to promote their talents. What is your advice for those poor parents?
Sure. Well, yeah, I could definitely commiserate with them, I'm sure, in some areas, but the thing that I'll say is I'll answer that first question. My daughters love to draw. It's a fantastic blessing whenever I get to just walk by and I ask, "Hey, what you doing?" And then I see them, their eyes brighten when they get to tell me what they're working on. I get to enjoy that their passion, from the same view that God might see me telling him about my passion. um, when they're working on something and they're excited to tell me this story about what's happening in their picture, um, that's just such an inspiration that says, okay, well, I'm so glad that I've been able to show a part of myself to them in that way that may inspire them to do something similar. I'm so excited that God has allowed me to show myself to my wife, to my daughters, that this is something that I'm passionate about, I'm excited about, and that they get to do the same thing, and they're encouraged to do the same thing. So that bleeds into the second part of the question that was asked, is that, what advice are we going to give to those parents when they're trying to promote, or when they're trying to encourage their children to have this same love of beauty, have the same love of glorifying God with their talents? I would just say be present. Be present in what they're doing. Don't forget to check up on your kids every now and then, because the the separation of a parent and a child, um, depending on how often you're interacting with your child, is going to really be impactful on your whole relationship. And you can't really encourage a child to get off of social media and stop playing video games when you're not that close to them, when you haven't developed that relationship or that mutual respect with each other. Another little piece that I would say is that don't forget that sometimes, even though we've got stigmatisms on things like video games, don't go overboard on discouraging that or pushing shame on your child for enjoying something like that. That's a hobby. I personally love getting into video games, but I do have to limit myself on how much I'm playing and if it's actually distracting me from proper work. If we're guiding our children in these things that have the stigmatism of oh, I'm not creating, I'm not developing anything, I'm not productive if I'm just on my social media all the time. If we don't have that relationship with our children, to encourage them to have healthy boundaries around these things, then they're going to figure out, hey, it's a lot easier to just be on my phone than to work on anything that I'm passionate about. So I would say develop your relationship with your children, try to further that, be excited about what they're excited about, and try as much as you can to show them what it's like to be passionate about a project, even if it doesn't make you a lot of money.
Okay, I think Karam has a question, but he wants me to ask my question first. Now, my question is one of a crucial question, actually, I consider it. What makes your illustrations, your pictures, orthodox? Is it the subject? Is it the one who is drawing put something different than somebody else who is drawing the same thing? If you do Noah story or Abraham story in picture, and somebody who is Protestant, from Protestant background, he does the same story, how would you explain the difference between your pictures versus his? How you put your Orthodox spirit into your work? What does make it Orthodox?
Yes, that's an excellent question, and one that I've asked myself without knowing that that's what I've been asking. But you put it into words, so thank you. What makes our stories orthodox? If we really just back up and think about that, what is orthodoxy? It's the true faith. We believe in the true faith. So whenever we're putting something into a story, I say we as in me. Whenever I'm putting something into this story, I'm trying to remember to put my true, genuine talents into it. Am I really just sloppily putting it on there? Am I being true to the story of the saint? Am I being respectful to the story of the saint? Or how am I telling this story so that it can really be authentic? Not to say that anyone else in any other religion might be inauthentic, but how are we bringing it to Christ when we're developing that story? That's the first part. Second thing that I would say is that as someone from an Orthodox background, we go to church every Sunday or Saturday night or Wednesday, Thursday mornings. We breathe this in. We are constantly around it if you put yourself in that environment. And so you kind of bring that in by osmosis, by just being around in there. And then you're able to bring that influence of the Orthodox Church into what you're writing. That comes to that makes me think of the language that we use in the books. I know there have been several times where I've put a prayer into the writing. Is that prayer using a verbiage of what we would naturally say in an Orthodox prayer, or is it using verbiage that is often used in a Protestant prayer? So I pay special attention to that. And then I also try to make sure that my style is influenced by what we already have as an example of Orthodox imagery, which is icons. How can I put that influence and my influence into the book so that it is like a written icon?
How much iconography affected or influenced your work, your talent?
I would say a lot. It's probably more than what I would think of when you first think of that answer. Just like I was saying earlier, when we're submerged in the environment, when we're submerged in the church, you naturally just take in everything with your senses that you mentioned earlier. You can breathe the incense. You can bring touch in when you're crossing yourself. You can kiss the icons. You'll see the icons all around you, even as your mind is wandering in church, as we all are guilty of. Your eyes will naturally just go to the beauty around the church, and we'll even see, even though we're distracted, we're still seeing the images that of stories that have brought saints closer to Christ, or that tell the stories of Christ's life. And so I think that it's a big influence in my style. There are several times where I will actually draw an icon in my books. I would like to eventually get into that, but we'll see. That might take a little bit more time.
All right. Karam Lays?
Yes, Gabe, I will go very fast now, asking you some questions about some of your like arts that you did. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Sure. So this is part of page, or this is a page in my second graphic novel that I created called The Broken Wheel. This is a story of Saint Catherine of Alexandria. I wanted to open up the story to her youth, and I wanted to show a little bit of her character in this process. This page in particular, I probably liked it the most because it was one that I had to revise maybe 2 or 3 times. Normally, I hate revising things because I fall in love with the original page. Maybe a way that the character is holding themselves, or maybe the angle of their face. Maybe I really liked the way that the color was displaced through the whole page. But this one is a particularly unique page because I had to revise it multiple times. That one that you saw was me just trashing my previous pages, even at the very last stages of just before publishing it. I had to trash it because I just did not think that it was genuine enough. It it wasn't my best work that I could put in it at the time, and I thought, no, I can do better. I've drawn the entire comic by then, and so I actually went back, and this is probably the most up to date my skill was when in the book, because I had to redo this page almost last. Um,
Great.
so we, yeah.
Yes, so I will now go to another page. This one, more
Sure.
colorful and more actions in this page. Tell us about this one.
Yes, this one is one of my first pages that I did for creating a comic or this sequential story or imagery process. So this is part of the New Martyr Publishing newsletter that I was speaking about at the very beginning of this interview. I wanted to branch out and finally tell them, hey, this is what I want to do. I'd like to create comics. So I'd like to do maybe a 2 or 3 part comic in the newsletter. And that's a page from it. So that's some of my first comic work, at least within the
Now,
that
let's
realm.
go to another one. I'm sad when I saw this one. Can you tell me about this one?
Yes, this one, it was written and illustrated at the very beginning of the pandemic. I felt compelled to draw what I was feeling and what we were going through at the beginning of the pandemic. This one was got really good responses and engagement, and when I shared it in social media. This page illustrates how I was feeling at the time of the pandemic and what it looked like when I was zooming out in this whole process. So yeah, about the very beginning of the pandemic when we were really starting to feel the struggle of having to be responsible to have our homes be a little church, not to be able to attend our own, just for the health of our families.
Okay, great. Now we will go in 30 seconds for each thing that I will show you. I saw like you did also some engraving.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a picture of the pumpkin that I carved for my office. We had a pumpkin carving contest, and that one was a special wizard that I carved. This is the second, I think second or third year that I actually really got into carving something a little bit more detailed than the pumpkins.
Great. Now I will come to the most important part. Like I know we like it's more than 1 hour, but we will stay more with you because now is the most
Sure.
interesting part in your life. When we talked with you, Gabe, last time, you talked about your church. You started a church with a group. I want you to tell us, because like this is like a great example of faith. You want to create art, you want to create church, you want to create groups of faithful people. This is the most important part in life, to bring people together. Tell us about this church.
Sure. This is my home church of St. Stephen's. In fact, this view particularly is a view of our what we had to set up during the pandemic. This is how we could set up our cameras so that we could watch from home. But this is St. Stephen's Orthodox Church in Crawfordsville, Indiana, with our parish priest of Father Joel Weir. We first started this parish. I was one of the founding families, part of one of the founding families. Back in 2002, we came into the Orthodox Church after coming in from the Evangelical Orthodox Church. Was essentially a group of people who are interested in becoming Orthodox, but kind of just one foot in the door. And so we finally came over to the Orthodox Church in that diocese in 2002, I believe. We just celebrated our 20th year celebration.
Great. Dr. Adnan, Laith, if you have anything before we end the program.
No, actually, Gabriel, it is a blessing
Thank you.
that meeting with you today and showing all these talented works. Actually, God bless you, and we wish you all kind of progress and more, more contribution to the life of the church in your life, in your way. So thank you very much. That's it's very, very beautiful, to hear and to see all these talents, and the most important point is to encourage those people who are talented to do their work for the glory of God and to spread His word to other people. Laith Karam, do you have any?
Yeah,
No.
one last more comment from me. Like, if anyone want to buy a gift for their kids, for their relatives, families, we have a lot of books by Gabe, and they are like posted on Ancient Faith Radio. If you can go to the Ancient Faith store and search the books. Like, I can see two of them here, the cross and the stag. And the, yes, and the other one is the broken wheel. Do you have any other books coming soon, Gabe, before we end?
I do. I have one more book coming, and it is about the life of Saint Moses the Strong. It is called, well, I'll leave the title for
Okay.
a little surprise once it's finally finished. But I also do have a website called amongthesaints.com. And on that website, it does have a link to my Patreon page, which does allow you to have a little bit more access to maybe behind the scenes of how I create the comic, and a little bit more tiers of extra stuff that I make available for my patrons.
Yes, thank you, Gabe. And we will post your page on our Apostles for Jesus pages. So if anyone want
Great.
anything, they can go to your page and buy from there or see your new work and coming books. Thank you, Gabe, for giving us the chance to be with us on Apostles for Jesus and sharing with us this great experience. Thank you, Gabe, and looking forward to see you in other episodes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate
Nice.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
God bless.